This is the No Stroke Podcast with your co-hosts David Dancero and Michael Garrow, helping you to support and thrive in life after stroke. Their podcast is designed for educational and community support purposes only and should not replace medical treatment and guidance of your own health professional team.
Welcome to episode 44 of the No Stroke Podcast. I'm Dave Dancero. I'm here with my co-host Michael Garrow. Good evening, Mike.
How we doing, David? We're already through January, first month of the year down.
Yeah, cold one.
And a few great episodes already. So, and more to come. One of them being today's.
Absolutely. We continue our Australian theme today. And we'll introduce our guest shortly. I just want to, I have to say, Mike, in the news, I know I'm wearing my Bruins colors today, but Tom Brady announced his retirement again. Any thoughts?
We're doing Australia's podcast here when we're talking American football. Nobody knows. Well, Tom Brady might be known, but yeah,
everyone knows Tom.
Whatever.
Brady.
He did it. He announced his second retirement, but
move on.
So yeah, I think today's guest, as David said, continuing the Australian theme here. We're the last episode with Stephen and Jeff, I think really opened our eyes and hopefully some of our listeners as well, really to the challenges that are faced, in rural parts of Australia and just how rural most of that country is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, super interesting conversation there that we had with both Stephen and Jeff from the Australian Stroke Alliance. So if you haven't listened to that, please do tune back into our previous episode to catch that. And it was actually, I guess today, Kim Malkin who introduced us to Jeff and Stephen. So kind of ties into perfectly to, the work of Kim's. So Kim Malkin is part of the Angels Initiative and a team lead as a stroke program manager in Australia. The Angels Initiative is a fascinating group that they've been able to bring together. So it's part of an initiative under Boehringer and Ingelheim, which is a German pharmaceutical company. And it's really the brainchild of both Thomas Fisher, who soon to be, I think he just announced his retirement. So another loss here for, the stroke community, but I'm sure he'll continue his legacy. And, his partner in crime, Jan, let's see if I get this right. I just watched a 6-minute video on YouTube to how to pronounce it correctly. I will butcher it. Van der Merwe. We'll see if I got that right. But Jan actually, experienced firsthand. He was living in, from South Africa, saw firsthand, through family's experience, and Kim will speak to it more. Saw the firsthand experience of a family member who suffered a stroke and just that disconnect, right? And we speak to it so much. But what's really interesting is, the same time that Jan experienced this in his family, Thomas was in Germany, kind of sparking the idea for trying to bring care and improve care to acute stroke treatment. So the Angels Initiative is a global group. They work, we'll obviously be focused today on the work that Kim is bringing and supporting within the Australia market or Australian country. But, their work is across the globe. Really with these developing countries that have many of the challenges that, even we in America, we do not have, we could speak to 500 plus episodes of just how disconnected it here, care is here in the States. But what they're doing, at a global level is really trying to improve access to care through establishing stroke-ready hospitals, right? So they do this with consultants in each of these developing countries, kind of work with and be really that connector and a network for, establishing the education. We'll talk to Kim around some of the stroke simulation work that they do to really prepare when a patient comes in, to time is brain, as we, discussed in most episodes, but, talked about in detail with Stephen and Jeff in the last show. And really their focus is to educate and get more of this access to care. Again, when getting to that hospital, that will have more opportunity for stroke patients to get that quick door to needle time, no matter where you are in the world. So it's an amazing initiative. They're partnered with groups such as the World Stroke Organization, the European Stroke Organization, have really grown this to a group. I think they have nearly 2,000 hospitals involved in around 90 different countries that are submitting data to this, to their group, which ultimately is going to help drive and expand their learnings, which would help in the delivery of care. So really excited to dive into this show. Kim again brings great experience. She, as you'll hear, as we when we bring her in, Kim she's spent nearly, I think she moved over to Australia in 2004, but she's not Australian born. She's originally from Scotland. Studied her undergrad in psychology, worked with autistic children growing up, in her early career, and then made the shift to BI, and has been involved in the Angels Initiative and stroke care for nearly a decade. So just really important work happening with the Angels Initiative. We'll dive deep into what's happening here in Australia, but as a whole, I think we're on a roll here. We're starting with Australia, David, but let's bring this global. There's I was looking at some of the colleagues of Kim, and there's folks working all over the world really trying to drive and improve access to care.
Yeah.
So
if they all have the energy and the passion that Kim has, that you're here and feel through the microphone here, we'll be on a solid course. This is also a first for us. This is the first podcast that was temporarily interrupted to a building evacuation for potential fire. So we really appreciate Kim's willingness to come back to the mic after that bit of a scare. So this is really great interview. I really appreciate, without giving it away, Kim's magic wand answer. So stay tuned for that. And I think we'll get into it. I just want to make sure you have your bags packed, Mike, and you are ready to go shortly after we get this one released, right? You're heading over to ISC, first trip to ISC for you. Is that correct?
Yeah. So really excited. I'm going to be at the International Stroke Conference in Dallas next week. So February 8th through 10th. I already chatted with a few of our past guests. So Dr. Lester Young from Tufts Medical Center. I know Khan from Hyperfine. There'll be a few folks there. I know Stephen, Jeff will be in attendance, as well as a group, a Mind Maze that we had an interview as well.
Perfect.
So it's going to be exciting. Be able to meet some of our past guests, in person, and really be with the folks that we've had the opportunity to speak with some amazing people, David, over the last year and a half, but there's so much change that's still needed. So I'm excited to be in the room and learn from these folks, make some connections, and hopefully stack up our guest list here for the rest of 2023.
Absolutely. So bring your running sneakers. I was fortunate I was able to get over there in 2020. So you're up. Bring your mic, your running sneakers, and your enthusiasm, and look forward to hearing who you bring to the mic over there. So perfect.
All right, well, let's get into it. Hi, Kim, and welcome to the No Stroke podcast. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you to you both for having me. And before we start, can I just congratulate you again, Michael, on your recent engagement? Very excited.
Thank you. Thank you. You're going to make me blush now. Come on.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah, it was special. And we were in a country, I proposed in a country of a company that we're going to be talking about today. So the origin of Boehringer Ingelheim. So, we're super, super excited to chat with you today, Kim. Our most recent episode, we chatted with Professor Jeffrey and Stephen, who you were able to get us in contact from the Australian Stroke Alliance, who are doing really great work in this kind of pre-hospital phase, getting imaging into an airplane, which is mind-blowing. I think they made a few name drops to Elon Musk and Starlink, so I think that's our next sponsorship opportunity. But I've been following the work of the Angels Initiative, and for a large pharmaceutical company like BI to be so aligned and focused within stroke care is unique, right? But I'd love for you to walk us through your background, because we're going to be talking about Australia today, but you're not actually origin from Australia, so we could cover that, and then we'll get into the meat and bones of what you're doing in Australia with the Angels Initiative. But let's start with you. Bring us through your background and kind of what got you to the role with the Angels.
Sure. So obviously with my accent, you can tell I'm not Australian. So I completed my honours degree in psychology in Scotland. And my, I guess, first taste of trying to create more inclusive healthcare was I worked with autistic children, their families and their communities, trying to integrate them into society better through inclusion in mainstream schools, etc. So I find my passion for healthcare and working in the community then, and didn't love the weather in Scotland, so came out and travelled in Australia. Absolutely fell in love with the country, the diversity of it. And I was offered the opportunity to work with Boehringer Ingelheim in 2005. And I think because they are a family-owned company, their mission to improve the healthcare of patients and animals, but also to transform lives, really resonated with me. But I've obviously been here for 18 years. So what's kept me here, I think, is more they're family owned. They genuinely think in generations, but also they have a number of initiatives that really demonstrates their social responsibility. And the Angels Initiative is one of those. So I have had a diverse career, to say the least, within Boehringer, but this is without doubt the best job I've ever had. It's being part of something much bigger. 10 years of my work in BI has been in stroke, and it's something I feel passionately about. Michael, you met your now fiance through stroke, and I met my husband through stroke. So it's something that I live and breathe every single day, and it's a job that I love. So that's how I got to where I am now.
Well, thank you, Kim, for sharing that and a great intro to your why and all the the great connections we've had through this community and building this. I'm always amazed how many interconnections are like that individuals meet and they find their why, and they get on a path that is empowering. And thank you for bringing another view where I feel like we're on the Australian tour now, and I'm learning as we go here, and Mike has a little more international experience with this. So you mentioned the initiative, the Angel Initiative. Can you talk specifically about the mission, and for those that aren't familiar with what's it about?
Sure, thanks, David. The mission, I guess, really simplified is more and better, but it's the same mission regardless of which country you work in across the world, and that is to increase the number of patients who are treated in stroke-ready hospitals, but also to optimize the quality of care that is received in centres that already exist. So I guess if you sort of think about it, the big mission is to try and ensure that patients receive the best stroke care regardless of where they are in the world or where they are in that specific country. And to be honest, it's a really lofty goal. And David, you mentioned community there. The community is ridiculously important in this. This isn't something that can be achieved by a pharmaceutical company or some passionate individuals alone. So the partnership that has been created between the Angels Initiative, the European Stroke Organisation and the World Stroke Organisation, and then in turn in each country that we work in, we have partnerships with the local stroke organisations, with charities, and then individual hospitals. So as I say, it's not something that we can achieve alone, and a huge part of what the Angels Initiative is around growing that global network. So creating those connections and trying to make sure that we work together towards that common goal of improving stroke care. So yeah, community, hugely important, common goal, purpose, all extremely important.
Perfect. And, I think, that mission aligns to, so many things that are, when you look at stroke care that are just so essential, like at the core, the, access point, right? Because, like we mentioned in our last discussion with Stephen and Jeffrey, it's like, no matter where you have a stroke, it's still a stroke, right? But it's that access to care once that incident's occurred, that's so disconnected across, different geographies. And, that's really where I'm fascinated by the work that you're doing, obviously in Europe, Australia, but focused within some of these emerging markets as well, or emerging, regions across the world, should I say. And so maybe let's just backtrack quickly to, we spoke about, BI being a really, the family-owned business and kind of really, having that passion for, supporting that lifestyle for patients. But it was the brainchild of, two individuals who, you're super fortunate to be able to work with. So let's just speak quickly on, now the role of Thomas going to be, moving into his retirement, but, the work that Jan and him together have been able to launch with this Angels Initiative.
Sure. Look, I think it's important to say that Boehringer has had a long history and a long association in stroke, so over 20 years. And I actually met Jan when we were both working in the stroke prevention space, so many, many moons ago. And he and Thomas were both working in the stroke space when they were both impacted family-wise by stroke. And Jan shares his story because it's what drives him, it's what drove him to set up the initiative. So back, I think it was in 2014, his mother-in-law had a stroke. And despite the fact that her symptoms were recognized and they had her at a hospital within 30 minutes, it took 7 hours for a CT scan to be done. So, I mean, what the listeners can't see is you guys shaking your head. It's just awful to think that this happens, and that's in a developed country. So their family still lives with that and the consequences. She was a prominent teacher in her community and living a full life. And unfortunately, that story is not uncommon. So because of the associations in stroke, Thomas and Jan spoke widely with the European Stroke Organisation and discovered that at that point in time, that a large majority of patients who went to hospital. So every 30 minutes in Europe, a stroke patient would die or would be severely disabled, not just because of their stroke, but because of the fact that they had been delivered to the wrong hospital. And they vowed that that was something that they wanted to change. And so that's the background of the Angels Initiative, but also the partnership with the ESO, and then the partnership with the WSO came later.
Right. And, I think it's, interesting, again, when we look at countries like Australia, where you're focused now, right, that, many folks who might not be familiar with the LEA and, the kind of vastness of Australia. I think Stephen said I can't, putting myself on the spot now, but there's a point in the center of Australia, Lake
Alice
something.
Brown.
Yeah. That is the size of France and Germany combined, right? And it's just a large credit, like, just to kind of puts things into perspective, just the vastness and how, rural parts of Australia are, with 2/3 of the population kind of being in those rural communities. So when it comes down to really the work that you're looking at, from the Australian perspective, talk to, your role as a team lead, right, with this Angels Initiative. So taking the hierarchy strategy of the Angels Initiative, and kind of being that team leader. What's kind of your focus right now?
Can I just ask, can you hear the fire alarm?
No.
Or is that not audible?
You need to go. You need to go.
Not yet. It's not making that funny noise yet, but I'll let you know if it does. It's like of all the days. Anyway,
Fire drill Fridays. Yeah.
So like in other countries, in Australia, there is a huge inequity in the stroke care that you will receive, dependent on whether you live in a regional or rural community or whether you live in a metropolitan city. So it's funny because when we first launched in Australia, there was this kind of, why are you launching in Australia? You work in developing countries. Australia is a developed country and it has some of the biggest names in stroke, but there is that huge inequity. And in fact, as Jeff and Steve said, 1/3 of our population lives in regional and rural communities. They are 17% more likely to have a stroke, but then they're also more likely to die or be left disabled because they don't have access to the stroke care that others have in their metropolitan areas. My mum has atrial fibrillation. She lives in a regional community, and I know if she suffered a stroke that she wouldn't receive the treatment that she should because she's not close to a stroke-ready hospital. So although we work with hospitals across all of Australia, and in actual fact in other countries that are our neighbours as well, a lot of the work of my team, so Rob and Sam, is actually based in regional and rural communities. And a huge part of what they do is to run what we call code stroke simulations. And that is, they go in and they will run a mock code stroke. So there's a patient who, I'll talk to the last one that we did, the patient, and then the ambulance comes, they do their entire process and then deliver that patient to the hospital. And then it's right through until the point that treatment choice would happen. And through that, there are observers, we're timing, we are looking at all of the processes that happen and identifying where those bottlenecks are. Now, I've just seen the fire engine and the sirens, and they're telling us to evacuate.
I was gonna say it kind of sounds like you're in a simulation right now. Like,
I was waiting to see if there was smoke coming behind you. So do what you have to do.
yeah, perfect time to take a break. Yeah,
Yeah.
go do what you need to do.
Totally.
We'll be here if you can get back. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I will. And I'll maybe message you on LinkedIn. Might be the best idea. Okay.
All right.
I'll chat to you soon.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
So we're going to take a short break and we will be back with our conversation with Kim Malkin.
All right, and we're back here with Kim Malkin. We had to have a little pause for a fire drill, a literal fire drill, but we luckily nothing is burnt down.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. Hey, there's a first for everything.
We gave Kim a moment to catch her breath. I don't know how many stairs you had to climb, but we're back.
We're back. And, before the break, we were talking around how one of the areas of focus for you guys, within the Australian market and, in other areas that you work are running these stroke code simulations, right? So really to emphasize that point of what you were saying to, improve the care at these stroke centers, right? So, putting the nurses, the doctors, everyone who's, managing that care in a real life scenario to try to increase, that speed and access to door to needle time. So super fascinating stuff there. And another area that you guys are focused on is around, clinical education, right? So taking these learnings and expanding them into other hospital groups. So do you want to kind of bring us through what that work looks like?
Sure. Education is certainly one of the key pillars of Angels. We have a global website for healthcare professionals, which has a ridiculous amount of education there. In Australia, again, having worked within the community, we managed to identify specific challenges here. And one of those was actually highlighted by somebody Stephen Jeff trained, who is now a prominent stroke neurologist himself, Professor Mark Parsons. And a few other physicians were talking about the fact that in Australia, one of the big issues is out of hours care. So if you go to hospital with a stroke within sort of office hours, you are likely to be treated better than if you go to a hospital out of hours. And that's even more sort of emphasized within regional and rural areas. So part of the issue is that the stroke care is taken over by trainees and basic physician trainees. And what we discovered is that there is no mandatory training. So these basic physician trainees are sent into regional and rural areas to work, but they've never had, or few of them will have, really clear training around stroke. So the confidence levels to actually be able to diagnose and know what to do or what information they needed when they call up the physician on call was extremely low. So that was something that we worked together with the Australasian Stroke Academy and specifically Dr. Liz Pepper and Associate Professor Andrew Wong kind of led the charge with a steering committee who created the content for an online self-directed module and then 2 face-to-face modules that would be run by stroke neurologists specific to BPTs. But further to that, I mean, one of the keys for me is that everything that we do should be sustainable beyond us. So there's no point in us investing in programs that only run because we're behind it all and we're driving it the whole way. So we're working with a couple of the state health services to make this mandatory for BPTs. So the hope is that there will be mandatory stroke training for basic physician trainees, and they will be confident when they go into these metropolitan or regional or rural. So that's the physician side. I'll go on to the nurses. side.
Yeah,
If
no,
you
it's
want to
fascinating.
answer that question, Michael.
No, I just, from another theme of what we pulled out of a podcast that we, the guests we had before, Stephen and Jeffrey, very well-known PT here, stateside, Mike Strood, who spoke something very similar to what you're saying and what you guys are trying to do around, that specialized training for stroke, from a provider level, with doctors and nurses. He spoke to his, and we'll get to yours, magic wand, right? His magic wand question or answer was, he really hoped that, in the future, a stroke survivor wouldn't be treated by a PT who never has dealt with a stroke patient before, right? So it's that, unique understanding of neuroplasticity and what's, the complexity of what stroke rehab looks like for most. So it just cool to kind of tie that together to, the other side as well, right?
It never ceases to amaze me that despite how prevalent stroke is, that the education around it and the focus and the investment into it isn't greater than what it is. I'm going off tangent, which is something I always do. But one of the things that again Jan recognized was that obviously stroke is very much under recognized. So you have the fast signs of stroke, but most people don't know them. And in fact, in Australia, I think it's only 36% of patients will arrive to hospital in time for treatment. And most of the time it's because they don't recognize it. So there's a program run by Angels and the WSO called Fast Heroes. And it's about teaching school children the fast signs, so that this is something that continues through their life, that if they were in the presence of their grandparents and something were to happen, that they would recognize a stroke, or at least know some questions to ask to determine whether it's a stroke. And we've seen some of the benefits of that in some countries with children actually phoning the emergency line because they've learned the fast signs. So yeah, stroke patients or people who suffer from stroke, the amount of people that are involved in their entire journey is incredible. And afterwards as well, one of my friends had a massive stroke, very young, so in her 20s, and they were going to put her into an old nowhere to care for them. So just there is so much work to be done, but that ability to sort of hone in on things that I guess impact and turning those insights into action is what I guess we are trying really hard to do with our partners.
Kim, I just have to get the name of that program again for the early intervention for the school age children.
It's called Fast Heroes.
Is you made my heart kind of jump there, because when I had my stroke in my 30s, I had 3 children under the age of 7, and I could not find materials that were age appropriate to not make stroke education seem scary. And they were just, it really was a mission of mine early on to try to change that. So that is, the best outcome is to prevent that first stroke or get that fast action to intervene quicker and get to that, the appropriate care. So I'm going to have to, we're definitely going to put that in the show notes. I want to make sure we get information out there. And it's often not easy when all the hard work you're doing, to give yourself a little recognition and a little pat on the back with all the hard work. But you we didn't bring it up. I don't think you would bring it up, that you and your team at the Angels Initiative have received some prestigious awards recently. And can you tell us about the WSO award in particular?
Sure.
If you don't mind talking about that.
Sure. I know that Steve and Jeff spoke to the award, but yeah, the award the initiative wins lots of awards, some of them locally, but the WSO award was, and I know that they said game changer gets used frequently, but certainly for us, it was a game changer. It was the first time that an industry had been awarded the Stroke Services Award by the World Stroke Organization. And what was it? I actually wrote it down here. So Werner Hacke, who was the president of the WSO at the time, said, the Angels Initiative has done more for the development of acute stroke care in low to middle income countries than any international program. I mean, I get teary reading that because it's like, they really, the passion of all of the people who work on this initiative is intense. Like, everybody loves their job, they love what they do, and I think this award more than anything exemplifies what can be done when industry and the healthcare systems actually work together. So to be recognized for the value that we bring outside of being clinicians, etc., is really heartwarming. And yeah, hats off to Jan and Thomas for driving this from the outset.
And, you know, sad to see Thomas leaving here for announcing his retirement, but, you know, a nice way, I'm sure, to kind of come full circle with his work. You know, and you know, maybe, you know, we'll have a chance to speak with Thomas around, you know, the work he's done and kind of his, you know, let him kind of share his thoughts on his career. But just, you know, with the focus of, you know, this continuing to be work that will never probably stop, right? You know, I don't think we'll ever get to the holy grail of stroke care across the world. But, you know, when you think of, you know, some of the top priorities and things that are going to be impacting you, like in the next 2-3 years, I mean, what's some exciting projects that you have lined up that you'll be working
on? So, wow, where do I start? Specific to what myself and my team with Sam and Rob, we are one of the newest launch countries. So we're just, and we launched during lockdown. So we created the education with the Australasian Stroke Academy. We're working with the Acute Stroke Nurses Education Network at the moment on a 20-hour online, fully interactive nurse program. So any nurse who's working in stroke can jump in, free access. It's hosted on the ASNN website because we want it to be sustainable beyond us. So people can jump in there and do that. So education is a huge component, and we did that during lockdown, and now we're out of lockdown. Our major focus is code stroke simulations. So we managed to run, when hospitals opened up at the end of last year, 6 in the last quarter of last year, and that will be a major focus for us, is really identifying those bottlenecks. But we are working with Alice Springs, which I think Steve and Jeff alluded to yesterday, because they're looking to set up a stroke unit. And I mean, we're not clinicians, but what we do is facilitate those networks. So being able to talk to them about what's worked well in other regional hospitals that we're working with, to put them in contact with people who can share code stroke protocols or go out and visit and help them set up. And this afternoon, actually, we have a meeting with Papua New Guinea. So a neighbour of ours, and they are in a very, very different situation. They have a CT scanner that often doesn't work. They've never thrombolized a patient because they've never had a patient arrive in the time, but they have just set up a stroke working group with all of the terms of reference, and they are moving forward. And it's a really exciting time to be starting on this journey with them. So those are some of our kind of exciting, some of the exciting work that we're doing this year.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
You know, and just being able to, you know, see and support, you know, these emerging markets with some of your learnings. And then, you know, what fascinated me with our discussion with Stephen and Jeffrey is like, you know, obviously how rural Australia is, like being able to take these learnings and really help scale other countries and get everyone up to speed, you know, to try to, you know, improve this access to care and drive your mission forward has to be, you know, and you spoke to it, everyone being so passionate about their work, but like for someone to have stroke impact their lives and be working on this every day, can't think of a, you know, more rewarding career. So must be super fun to kind of be in your shoes every day and until you have to go downstairs for a fire drill, but just keep you safe.
Well, in case, Mike, in case there's another one, let's I am gonna hand the magic wand over to you, Mike, and I know Kim is well prepped for this, right? But how can listeners so we can, you know, if you want to give a shout out, how can listeners you know, get to the Angels Initiative resources? Is there a website or something you want to include, and we'll put in the show notes?
Obviously, we have the Angels Initiative website, which is really set up for healthcare professionals and stroke teams. So if there's a stroke team that just wants to look at how other hospitals have gone from 2 hours door to needle times or door to therapy times, or how other hospitals have sort of improved their processes, then the Angels Initiative website is the best place to go. To learn more, if you're not a healthcare professional, there's lots on the Boehringer Ingelheim website that talks to what it is that we do and some of the other projects that we do in terms of our sustainable development for generations side of things.
Perfect. So we'll get both of those in the show notes.
And any events or anything that you guys will be at in the next few months?
So the European Angels will be at the European Stroke Organisation conference, because a huge component of the success is recognising hospitals through quality monitoring. So obviously hospitals really need to collect their data and their times, etc., to be able to see where they're not doing well and then improve on them. So the European Stroke Organisation have awards. And so the Europeans go there, and then we go to the World Stroke Organisation awards in Canada. So hopefully we
Toronto, right? Toronto,
yeah.
Yeah, that'll be nice. Hopefully we'll see you there. Cool. So yeah, let's roll into this. You know, last question, famously asked. You know, we at least mark it as being famous. We'll take it. We've seen a few other podcasts now kind of steal our thunder with this magic wand. I won't mention name. I won't mention name.
I noticed that. Notice that, Mike.
So, you know, Kim, you know, you've been working, you know, kind of moved from a career in social work, you know, from, you know, Scotland. You've got sick of the weather. It's been, you know, an amazing career to date for you, and you've been able to work with this stroke population for many years now under an organization who's really empowering you to do this, and your team to make this change and work and kind of be those connectors for the system. So, you know, using that knowledge and your background and, you know, the connections that you've made over the years, if we were to hand you a magic wand, you know, how would you take that magic wand and not only maybe change stroke care here, you know, from an Australian perspective, but in these geographies that you guys work across as well?
Yeah, look, I thought long and hard about this question, because obviously redesigning the stroke pathway or trying to improve the stroke pathway is something that we do day in, day out. It's what we look at. But I have to say, like 80% of strokes are preventable. And I know the whole, like, if you had a magic wand, you'd make it not happen. And I know the magic wand isn't that magical, but 80% of strokes are preventable. And I think the issue in our healthcare system is, to some degree, the pressure that's put on primary care in that prevention space. So much like every other country, GPs, who are the absolute backbone of prevention and chronic disease management, are absolutely just under the pump. So nobody really goes to their GP for wellness, because you have to be sick to go, because you know that you're just adding to their workload. So if I had a magic wand, it would be to somehow have wellness clinics where there is screening. So of those 80% preventable strokes, 90% of those strokes come from 10 risk factors. So if we were screened early, and it was part of our culture as a society to actually go to these places to be screened and look after ourselves early on, and we could prevent them in that way, that would be my magic wand, I think.
Prevention's king.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer, because if you're not taught how to build a resilient brain and to know how to prevent, the wellness part is just not part of the equation. And it makes me just reflect quickly on like Pam Duncan's interview that we did a couple episodes back, that the association between high blood pressure and just managing hypertension, I think like 3/4 of the folks that they interviewed after didn't even understand that there was an association between high blood pressure and stroke. And it's one of the top risk factors. So thank you for that. I could tell you put some thought into that, and thank you so much. Resonates with me as a health professional. That resonates with me with the current medical model. So thank you.
And a shameless plug, as an employee of CVS Health, there is a CVS within 7 minutes of everyone in the United States, at least. So if you are looking for these wellness exams, again, shameless plug to CVS. But, I think that's, like, to even say that though, right? We do, and there's a big reason, outside the podcast, my full-time job is with CVS Health, and, that a big reason I'm with them is because they're so tightly knit to the community, right? It's accessible, but, I think to add another layer of complexity is, like, if we put a wellness clinic at, the outside of everyone's front door, it's the motivation for them to go in, right? And that,
Totally.
that's the motivation, trying to find that intrinsic, pain point for them to say, all right, I need to go do this. So, but no, fascinating answer. And, it's been really, really enjoyable to chat with you today, Kim. Obviously had a bit of the first time ever fire drill midway through the chat, but, this is,
I like to be
we got through it. Perfect.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much to both of you for having me as part of the interview, and to be able to discuss the Angels. It's something that I'm personally very proud to be part of, and I know I speak on behalf of everyone who works on the Angels Initiative, that this is a joy for us. So if people want to get involved, I'd love to hear from them.
Thank you, Kim. It's been our pleasure.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.